Okay, we are going to get started. We are at times. We've got quorums, so we're going to get started. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We'll go to item 1.1, a review of this evening's agenda. Any comments, questions? I figure it's going to be an easy. Okay. 1.2, approval of the August 30th, 2023 Joint City Council Planning Commission meeting minutes. Wow, it's been since August since we met. Okay, I'll look for a motion.
The Joint City Council Planning Commission meetings from August 30th, 2023.
I'll second.
Second by Heather. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we've got one item tonight on the agenda, discussion of ordinances related to residential development of infill and redevelopment. It's going to be a tag team tonight between Blake and Michael. Let's start with Blake.
Yep, thank you. All right, glad everybody can make it out tonight. So we want to talk to both bodies tonight because we want to address some of the issues that we're seeing, mainly with evolving development patterns in Herriman. We're no longer seeing the large parcels, Olympia, Rosecrest. What you're seeing here is the large undeveloped parcels that are still remaining. And these still aren't even large compared to what our historic development patterns have been. And so we want to talk about some tools that we need to put in the toolbox for addressing some of these evolving development patterns. And some of the things that we've seen is the easy stuff's developed. So we're left with the hard things that haven't been developed because it's been hard or expensive, and it's created some other challenges. So as we're seeing, a lot of things are happening. This is just for example, this isn't something that's really happening. I just drew this up to kind of highlight. These are some undeveloped parcels that are in Old Town area. They're small, a couple of 1 acre, half-acre pieces, maybe 2 or 3 acres. But these are things where we're seeing a lot of different challenges as development's coming in. You can see, like if this were to develop here, you've got neighbors on both sides that would have to experience this development going on right next to their house that they've probably lived in for 20, 30, 40 years. So we want to get some tools in the toolbox and talk about what we can do to maybe address some of these concerns and create some better developments coming forward. The other thing that is challenging to us is the legislation. Every year it seems that there's new legislation that comes out that's requiring us to do things. These two bills have been pretty influential in what's been going on around the state recently. One of the big things is the Moderate Income Housing Report. They're putting a little bit more teeth to that we're going to have to put some action to it and address some of the things that we're putting in our reports. ADUs, and then the subdivision review approval process. They keep taking away things and changing things. One of the big changes that does affect something we're going to talk about tonight is not having city council involved in any of the subdivision review process. That's against state code now. So that's been something we have to constantly consider and work through. And then some of these other things that they've gone through, Planning Commission can only have 1 public hearing on an item. Engineering can only have 4 total reviews on a subdivision. So some of these things we're talking about tonight help us get through some of those concerns. So main things we're trying to address: plan review, trying to make sure that we're following state code and that we're getting the tools in place that are providing efficient use of the land, giving these landowners that are in the city some options, some flexibility in their development, and trying to just create some smart development. And then get the moderate income housing addressed. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the A110 bonus density. And this is a section of the code that allows, in the A110 zone, you get a base density of 1.8 units per acre. And then you can work up to 2.5 in some cases if you do certain things in the table that allows for bonus density. Some of the concerns is a lot of those bonus density items are going to require city council input, and if we can't include them in our subdivision review process, then we're out of compliance with state code. Some of these also, one other thing I didn't bring up is engineering has to have, you get your reviews either or preliminary plat or final plat. You can't split them over the both. So you basically have to have all your engineering review done on one side or the other. So a lot of this has required us to get to a certain point, take it to Planning Commission, have our public hearing if we need to, then get a conditional approval or get continued and go back and do some more engineering. And so we're getting that taken away from us. And then a lot of these bonus density items, they really should be negotiated through a development agreement with council. And that's the way to get the council involved in it, is the developer wants to come in, they want to get some more density, then let's talk about a development agreement. And then that would go through the standard process of Planning Commission and City Council. So I got a table after this, it's the table from the code, but our recommendation is to remove this provision from the code and just do the 10,000 square foot lots in the zone, and you just have to meet all the requirements of a standard residential. So these are some of the examples. I highlighted the key ones. So the 10-foot park strip behind the sidewalk, that one wouldn't really require any extra review, but it does create some additional maintenance liability on the cities, more cost. But dedicating and installing a trail, I talked a little bit with Kyle, Finance Director, and if this is in the Parks Master Plan or a system improvement, we're obligated to reimburse for those items. We've been collecting impact fees. There actually could be some legal ramifications if we don't reimburse them with the impact fees that have been paid for those items. Half-acre lots that buffer just adjacent existing agricultural lots. If we'd have done that all along Olympia, we'd end up with half-acre lots next to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 square foot lots, which might not be the best development pattern. And then the last one, the public buildings for community facilities, you can get 0.3 units per acre on that. But that's really something that should go to City Council and be discussed and negotiated to go through that process. And that, like I said, is against the state code. So that's one item. I'll flip it over to Mike here to go through the next sections, but I was hoping that we could hold questions and discussion until we got to the very end, because some of these items kind of interconnect, and be nice to have discussion after we have the full presentation done. So. Get your hands full.
And the staff report that Blake and I put together has a summary of all these items with some key links or references to city code. So keep that in front of you, because we are trying to keep this a very tight meeting tonight. I think we're trying to be out by 7 is what we were hoping. Yeah. So the next one is trying to look for ways that we can implement or comply with the moderate income housing plan that we adopted. It was required by the state. So we're looking for, are there some opportunities to adopt some new zoning types that are less than 10,000 square feet? This is something that the Planning Commission has already been working on. It was largely initiated because Perry Homes has some abutting property around Hidden Oaks that is not within the that MDA. Is that a noise I need to be? Ah. Do you want me to wait, Destiny, or? Okay. Okay, we're ready to go. I think I went ahead. The next one is looking at ADUs, detached ADUs. As we all know, we were required by the state to do internal. There was some discussion that that might be a requirement or come up in the last legislative update, this 2024 session, and it did not. But a lot of cities around us are doing or addressing detached ADUs. So that's something that we're we're looking at or would like direction from the council on? Yes.
So I'm a part of the land use task force with the league, and this is definitely a topic that the developers are going to be pushing this next
Okay.
legislative session.
Okay.
So I think it's good to have the conversation now.
Yeah.
And see what restrictions we want to get.
The next one is our PUD or planned development overlay zone requires a minimum acreage of 15 acres, which is you're doing infill development. A lot of times having a small PUD can be advantageous to address issues that you couldn't anticipate in the base zone. Also, some of our zone types, like the R210 zone, says that you have to have a PUD approval in order to use the R210 zone. There's a provision in state code that says that cities can't have a minimum acreage requirement for a rezone application. And so by default, that R210 zone does not meet that state standard. So that's something that we really should address in our code. Either establishing there's no link between the R210 zone and a PUD, or we could eliminate the minimum acreage requirement for a PUD. It's not wanting to advance. There we go. And then the last one is looking for opportunities to do private roads outside of a PUD. And I think you're going to talk about that one. Okay.
So, yeah, this is an existing subdivision in Herriman, out off of Main Street and 7300 West. It's called Ivy Place. And they just did this because this is what was allowed by our code, and we don't really have any other way to address infill development besides flag lots. Or you could do a 53-foot wide road in here, but that took all their property, so they couldn't meet the lot requirement. But you could see if we keep that as being the only tool we have for infill, then this could just continue down this road, and you could have flag lot, flag lot, flag lot all the way down. And I'm sure you can think of other streets in the city that would follow that same pattern. We actually have some over just north of Butterfield Park that'll be on Planning Commission here in the next meeting. So those were the main things. Just kind of wanted to go over this. So what are we trying to accomplish tonight? We're hoping to get more and better development options for our residents, for the landowners. Because really, as you get into this smaller infill stuff, you're really working more, I think, with the landowners than you are the big development companies. So it's going to help them out. And then we hear it from, as staff here, people coming in trying to develop and just getting kind of frustrated with what's allowed, what they can do. Got to address the changing development patterns, like I talked about. We're seeing a lot more of the small lot stuff. And then this modern income housing plan, just making sure that we're staying on top of addressing those items so that the state doesn't have the opportunity to come in and beat us up. So these were the ones we presented tonight, these items here. And we're just looking for some discussion, maybe direction on if both bodies want us to move forward with any of those items. We know that this one is kind of moving forward in some form or fashion with the Planning Commission and the small lot discussion that we've had. And then are there any other items that we're missing that we should be considering? Some things that we haven't talked about here, things you've heard about that maybe we should look into and start bringing back for discussion. So I'd like to open it up, and hopefully we can talk here for a little bit and get some direction for staff here if we want to move forward with any of these. If there's any giant concerns. I know that we've done a lot of research, and Mike and I have discussed a lot of these in depth. His staff's also worked through it. Bryce and I have talked about private road discussions quite a bit, so we're hopefully ready to answer any questions, but also ready to go research them if you have some that we haven't thought about.
Blake, you want to take them one at a time?
If you want to, yeah.
So go ahead, remember with your mics, turn them on green if you're going to comment. So you want to start with single-family zoning district? Do you want to catch us up on what the Planning Commission's been? Michael, I know you and I have talked a little bit, but do you want to count?
So the commission has had one public hearing on a text amendment that would possibly create some zone types with a range of between 5,000 to 8,000 square foot lots. And then we were looking at applying that new zone type to some small parcels adjacent to Hidden Oaks. It would extend a roadway that is planned in the Hidden Oaks Master Development Agreement area. It would also trigger a general plan amendment because we're potentially creating new zone districts that are not identified in the general plans. We need to show where in the city those zone types could go. So we've had that hearing, but it was all tabled. It was the first meeting we had with the Planning Commission. And so we're going to have a follow-up conversation just in the work meeting only next week. So there's a lot of flexibility. We're just really studying this issue, hopefully trying to look for opportunities that would encourage or facilitate the introduction of design guidelines, which we can't require, as we know, for single-family detached homes. But if a developer has an opportunity, like some kind of incentive, a regulatory incentive, that would allow a negotiation with the city, then we can require design guidelines. And I think that is really important. You can find lots of very undesirable development on very small lots, very small homes, which I know meets that attainability goal. But I feel like over time, that's not the development pattern that's going to produce places of value, which also helps generate personal wealth, right? You want to see these properties be a stepping stone for families, right? From home ownership into greater prosperity, really. So we want to make sure that we're getting good product on small lots that are true starter homes. So that's the wrestle that the Planning Commission has already been engaged in, is what are those incentives, what are those standards? If you have any questions on that, or?
Is there a tool or a different tool like a PUD or a MDA that we could do design guidelines in, if we had that definition where we drop most of these the infill into PUDs?
Yes, so any time that there is a negotiation, so a developer is asking for a modification of a zoning regulation. Or, in the case with MDAs, sometimes maybe there's a request to get a density bonus or maybe a vested development right. Whenever there's a negotiation, then we can introduce design standards. But the state is also saying that we have to have a kind of like a clear path for development. You can't have a zone type that requires some other like negotiated process. You have to have all the rules established in that base zone. And then if they meet all those standards, then they should be able to proceed with their development proposal, right? So that's why they've tried to remove some of these design guidelines from cities' control. But in my experience, it's not really about the density, it's about the design. The state really attacked design first, and then they started pushing cities on density. And I think they should have let us keep design, because as we get more dense, that design becomes a greater factor into building communities of success, right? We've got to be able to regain control over the design part of the equation. And the only way you can do that is to incentivize or create a path that would facilitate negotiation.
Well, I think with design, it's just not the facade, it's cross-section, the urban design elements of it, like how you design the street as a whole, not just, how does it look when you pass the house?
Right.
So as you think about that, in Herriman, because you've got two different worlds here, right? You've got the infill stuff in the old town. So we have 100-foot wide cross sections in Old Town, and then you get out to the new stuff and it's greenfield, so you can make it what it is. And if you do this zoning, and it's almost, Michael had talked about zoning districts. It's almost like if you create districts, there might be different standards in each district. So if you have a district out with new development, you might have certain standards where you're addressing a lot of this, and cross section, the way you look and feel. The Old Town, maybe you need to create a district and start working towards that, but it might take a long time because, as we've talked talk, we've had people come in and try to get the city to give up pieces of property for the street, but we say, well, you gotta take the whole street then, you can't just do pieces and have a piece here, a piece there, and leave 100 feet wide in between. So there's some definite challenges with trying to bring that kind of stuff in the old town portions of town, if we wanna create smaller lot zoning in that area.
So that was my question I was gonna ask is, are we gonna abandon the Old Town area? Cause I mean, all those areas we were looking at the map for infill are technically in Old Town.
So a lot of it, I think, is currently zone A1 or A.25, but they still have 2 acre lots and 1 acre lots. So per our general plan, they legally can ask for smaller lots if there is. And we don't currently have a zone that's smaller than 1/4 acre lots. And if they go to agricultural, then you're still 1.8, so you're actually more like 1/2 acre, 1/3 acre lots. You're not really seeing true quarters in those areas, unless they do 1/4 and then 1 acre lot. So, but yeah, that's kind of the question. Does the council and commission want to move that direction and do that? Are there areas? There's a lot of pressure to address this moderate income housing.
Well, the thing I liked about the R16 and the RA1 that we talked about last time is I think it allows different developers to come into our city, because unless you're doing like a master plan development, you're doing a PUD, like you had to have 15 acres or you had to have a lot of legal backing to go through the MDA process. And it was, I don't know, for me it was kind of funky because it's like with that Perry Homes is a perfect example of they got this zoning for 6,000 square foot lots. Well, but we don't have the zone for it, but they got it through the PUD, right? And it kind of pushes away other smaller developers from being able to do something if they don't have a huge piece of property. This way it's like, oh, no, you can come in and do 10 houses or 5 and have the same density that someone else does. But I think where we have to be careful is like what amenities are we getting along with the smaller density?
Yeah. The early drafts that we've shown to the planning commission already are starting to fold in like certain subdivision standards right into the zoning code that's specific to that lot pattern. And that's kind of new. You know, we're basically saying not only are we looking at the zone, but we're also looking at the design of the right of way, which the state still allows. So we're trying to operate within that area. What can we regulate versus what has the state prohibited us from regulating? So it's a pretty kind of a hybrid. It's moving more towards this form-based code that some cities have already adopted. I know that North Salt Lake, where Andrea, where you work, they've done some of that already. But it's not a full-on form-based code because we still regulate use within the zone. So.
Well, it seems like Adam's question would be something that we'd have to add to the list of questions. What do we want to do with Old Town? Because the intent was to kind of preserve.
Correct. That's kind of what I was worried about is
Right.
we've always established that, and
Right.
it's a different change that I personally am not comfortable with, but if that's something that we need to start working towards, that's a different discussion, right?
Probably need to make a decision on that one.
Yeah.
way or
Yeah.
another.
Yeah, if we want to preserve Old Town Herriman with certain design standards, we could create an overlay specific to that, or even a zone type that is specific to it. So, which I would be very supportive of, very interested in seeing that happen.
Currently, what we're seeing
Yeah.
is flag
Yeah.
lots.
Yeah,
You could just do a historic district.
yeah,
I like that idea.
potentially.
And that's where I almost lean on, maybe we just start looking at districts individually across the community anyway, because then you get into the argument of 6,400, the segment between 131st and Main Street,
Yeah.
134th and Main Street, is that Old Town? And so that's where I think it would be better if we just had staff kind of bubble the zones and then us as a group starts trying to tackle each individually,
Yeah.
because I think they're gonna have their own challenges. Old Town, that 100-foot distance, that's gonna be a beast within itself, the vacation of
Yeah.
roads and
Yeah.
that, that to me
Well,
is
there's no
a
curb,
total different
right?
issue than
Just kind of different
infill up
cross-section.
around Hidden Oaks or things like that. So
Some of those right-of-ways add an extra lot or two to some of these,
correct.
potentially some of these subdivisions.
Yeah, for sure.
And
When we did the PUD 15 acres, the idea back then was to try and make it more simple subdivisions, so we weren't always negotiating on everything and everything.
Yeah.
That's why, if everybody remembers, that's why we picked 15 acres,
Yep,
is to try and entice to not do.
gather.
To either gather or just do your island, right? Like,
Yeah.
that was your choice and not have to do so many negotiations.
As you're starting to see the parcels, the empty parcels show up, that's another thing we've talked about. You said gather, but right now it's required to be contiguous.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some discussion, can PUDs be non-contiguous?
And that might be a way to
That's
solve
interesting.
some of the challenges from this area to that area, right? Is to
Allow them all in
Allow
the same
to grab.
PUD so that they fall under the same design guidelines, but they don't have to be.
One of the really big advantages of CUD is they're required to dedicate open space. So you get open space from one of those, but you don't get open space from other residential or agricultural developments.
Well, and when we're doing small PUDs, we have an option of having that open space be off-site, or maybe a fee in lieu towards open space where it's more needed in the city. So, one of the advantages of creating these new zoning, small lot zones within the city is it's not mapped anywhere. So we're creating the tool, but we control exactly where it would be used, based on a development request or a rezone request. So we don't have an unintended consequence where we're affecting existing land use in the city. We're just creating a zone type, but we still get to control where it goes. So, and then it also shows the state that we are working on this problem of moderate income housing by creating some opportunities for zoning, for small lot zones. So maybe where that one's moving forward and the council will see an iteration of that, unless the council has any other feedback at this point in time on that item, maybe we should move on.
The only other zoning one I don't see right here, I assume it's part of the zone, is your very first thing that you brought up, the A110.
Yes.
100% supportive of that, of an individual, of getting rid of the bonus density. That's the most confusing nightmare. It's just reincarnation of 825. It's like, oh my.
It's been a little complicated and controversial, and it's been difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and as Blake mentioned, it does potentially have some obligations for the city that maybe the city doesn't want,
Yeah.
right? And we've had that from time to time,
Yeah.
so.
If we can bring that proposal through of removing that section, that would go through planning commission and city council if
I would love to see it come.
That
Yeah.
one, as well as, I really do think on any of our zones in the future, we need to be careful not to have ranges.
Yeah.
Just like what you're saying with A110. That's the fact. That's all it is. We're not talking about, that's the minimum.
Want something else,
Yeah.
apply for a
Yeah,
different zone.
that's a different conversation.
Exactly.
Like you mentioned earlier, okay, we're talking mostly about infill properties, and they're 1 to 2 acres or so. They're generally deeper than they are wide. I like the notion of the smaller 6,000, 7,000, 5,000 square foot lots. A side driveway, a detached garage out back. But accommodating a full public street becomes problematic on some of those. What's the consequences of having them do private roads? I mean, I can see all these infill lots and all of a sudden there's a private road on everything with a cul-de-sac on it, so probably need to be a little prudent with that, but it makes it more conducive, I believe, to developing it.
I think we've talked quite a bit about this. You think about the frontage of that lot, if it's a 90-foot wide lot, you have one house on it, the city's collecting tax revenues annually from one house on that lot. You put 3 lots off that road, you have a private road accessing them, they're really obligated to keep that road up. There's no, if they stop maintaining it, it's them that's impacted, no one else is impacted from not maintaining that road. so there's really no obligation on the city to take that over. The city is, I mean, we already don't collect a lot of tax revenue to pay for the road maintenance in front of the house. So you're getting closer to making the city whole on that, if you have 3 lots on it. But you do have, like you said, you introduce traffic conflict points if you have those coming out.
Yeah, you have some, traffic concerns, but then, I don't know, based on those of you that have worked with cities for a long time, is there a downside to the private road over time? And we're trying to build not just providing for the state codes and such, but to build community here and to keep it nice and upbeat and all that. Do private roads tend to downgrade with time and the neighborhoods become kind of run down, or what's your opinion?
Well, and I think the way we have been talking about, these would be like short, like, almost like lanes.
Asphalt
Yeah.
painted,
Yeah.
asphalt paved, right?
Yeah,
Or concrete.
just it's like 3-4
How
houses
hard to
long.
use.
Yeah.
That'd be an improved service.
So I mean, the city originally hated private roads because back in the days when we were the county, right, you were just getting vacation that nobody maintained, right? I know, I think it's 5800 West, you guys highlighted one of those locations. It's, in essence, it's a private road that nobody can agree to maintain, nobody can agree to do any of that. And I personally don't have a problem with private roads if it's all developed at the same time. It's when it's developed, like, I bought my lot, I improved my 20 feet in front of us, and you just keep going, like, again, 5800 West is the example that I would use, and that's where you really struggle with private roads.
Yeah.
I don't personally have a
58's a
problem with
really
private roads anywhere.
Interesting animal, because it's historic, it's been there. I think the ones, I'm probably anticipating seeing more of the like lane where you'd have 3-4 lots off of it.
Yeah.
If you were trying to create an access through that private road from another piece of adjoining property, I don't think, you need to make it public.
So
We're running into that with Lake Ridge.
I mean, we almost already started this anyway, if you go like by the Marble where the Marble family's been developing. We approved one of the lots that's right off of 64th, but in reality, they're accessing the private road, and we all kind of just look the other way. So to me, private roads, we shouldn't even worry about. As long as it's approved as the whole area, and it's not, again, doing what we did. I mean, 57 and 58 were both private roads. They both did the same thing. The problem with 58 is all the houses built really close to the roadway, so you couldn't put a city standard roadway in there. And so that's where, to me, private roads are a good thing as long as it's all contained within that development.
What about like length? Like for me, it's like depending on distance is,
Fire
width.
requires, won't let them go over a certain distance, but once you go over that distance, you have to have a
Turn around.
Okay.
So, but yeah, there's probably some discussion about the length.
I would be, I'm opposed to private roads because we're running into issues with certain communities, even my HOA, like the guy parks his RV and truck and trailer out front of his house, I park my vehicle, one car's getting through, it's like a daybreak parking lot, right? Emergency vehicle, super tight squeeze. So at night, there's no parking to meet certain restrictions and requirements, but heaven forbid the HOA goes under or shifts or changes or dissolves. We have an issue right now that's possibly where we're buying some roads, right? Maybe. And so it's really tough that.
Are we? I know we're being pressured.
Right, but if we don't require them to be if we don't have our standards set and we don't do the 57 or foot and we don't make them put those private roads in at that city minimum, then there's issues down the road. And if it's a flag lot or a single house or 2 or 3 houses on one piece of property, on an acre they subdivide, that's different rather than like
Most of our private roads that we're talking with these infills would be like 5 lots max, kind of.
Yeah.
Not HOA.
We do have a requirement in our standards that
A
if you
the
build,
old family style, you
Yeah.
develop your house and all your kids get everybody shares the roadway ownership rather than it being Herriman owned. It's
subdivision private roads right now are guided by the standard, they have to meet the cross-section of a public.
but what classifies as subdivision?
Right now, anything except for a
Yep.
flag lot, any subdivision, it's not a PUD. And then the PUDs still have to meet the 53-foot wide asphalt section.
Yep.
Where they are differing is they're changing their flag strips or sidewalk on one side or the other. That's where they're changing some things.
And that's
Or they're
another
putting
reason-
sidewalk right
And that's another reason why the PUD was created at 15 acres is to avoid private roads on below 15.
On the lower side, yeah.
So to me, if we tied it somehow to like no more than 5 lots on a private road, I think that's the intent of private roads I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, you have 5 acres, you're just selling enough to your 4 kids and keeping your house. And you're creating a private road for your little subdivision.
Well, if you
We've
go
actually
bigger than your
disabled
standard
that
road
in Herriman.
cross section.
And we've promoted them in the type you're talking about, which I completely agree. And I actually disagree. I agree with you that that's where we should definitely be forcing more public roads because we have no authorization to do anything. Our police force can't really do anything, and everybody just kind of gets mad at everybody.
Yeah.
But I think private roads on small, and that's what I would even say, if we just said five lots or less.
Mm-hmm.
You would still have to convince me, because families always agree on everything, especially after mom and dad died, so that would be the hardest part, right?
We've had issues in the
Boy,
past. I
that's
remember some up
Yeah.
on Butterfield Parkway. It was just flag lots, and they had a dispute over the road, and one guy was parking his trailer on it.
Yep.
And he was calling the city to come fix the problem. You guys gotta fix it yourself, but we kept getting drug into it. So there are some concerns there with, some of that stuff. So they're gonna need proper easements, and
Yeah,
those are old historic subdivisions that were meets and
they
bounds.
definitely recorded on plats and
It's
stuff.
the same as Daryl's concern too, as far as, in 15 years when their asphalt's all falling apart and now everybody can afford to resurface the road, it's their responsibility, and then it's an eyesore,
Or they're dragging debris on the
and
roads.
then it becomes a code enforcement issue, and then you have to try and figure out how everybody's gonna afford it. So there can definitely be issues with
There's a
little
trade-off.
private roads, but it's probably, there's issues with every decision that we make, and so it's probably weighed out as probably the best way to do it.
Well, without doing it, we're basically making it so there's no real way to do those infills.
Exactly.
We're giving up so much land for our roadway
Yeah.
for a 2-acre piece that you're just like, well, why do
Yeah,
anything?
exactly.
And that's where you still do get, I won't say blight, but you still get the issues we have where you're not fixing the property and getting it to where we're like,
Yeah.
where we've gotten to.
And currently, we don't allow private roads, so you're
Outside
pushing
of
a flag lot, but
Yeah.
if you're sitting on a .9 acre lot,
Mm-hmm.
and you're 80 years old and you've lived there your whole life, but you don't wanna move, but you do wanna subdivide, there's no option.
Yeah, no, I think it's
So-
necessary.
I'm curious, for this point of this discussion, do you want us to do more research on this and bring it back? Because that's really the question. I don't think you can solve it tonight, and because we've been talking about it for quite a while, you still have some other items. I've been told to try and rein you in and bring in.
It sounds like if we're just talking about shorter lanes and having engineering develop some cross-section types for private lanes outside of the PUD as a potential.
Yeah.
Sounds like maybe that's okay to explore. Okay.
There's some other cities that I know have some pretty good standards in
Yeah.
zoning.
It's been a while since we've done form-based code. Do you think that's something that we could review in a work session? I feel
Yes.
like the district aspect of that will as well in a form-based
Yeah.
code.
Yeah, we can do that.
Also,
Still a way to use. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, with the flag lot, like, we see these flag lots, and it's kind of like, well, I guess this is what we're gonna do. I don't know, are there other options? Like, I don't know, are we gonna bring a lane, like, behind the houses?
So these guys came in and talked about doing a cul-de-sac, but they needed to rezone to something that wasn't allowed for general plan. So we said, well, you can go talk to your neighbors and bring in more lots and then make it work, but then their neighbors didn't want to work with them, or
Right.
it's more than they wanted to take on. So yeah, currently for like this subdivision, to do that, there was really no other option rather than maybe just splitting that into 2 deep lots and having 2 houses. So, yeah.
Like, is there just not a lot of creative options, I guess, other than flag lots? Because
Do a hammerhead.
I don't know, for me, I know a lot of people are fine with flag lots, but it's a whole lot of wasted land for just paving to get to a lot. a lot of times, right? And it's so inefficient, cause it's like you said, almost like a cul-de-sac would have been so much easier if you just had one lane going to those two houses in the back. But no, we can't do that, cause we can't agree.
Yeah, if you could combine everything, you could have brought a road in here and a cul-de-sac.
Right, something, like, I don't know.
Or a road all the way back out. And you could,
Cause you're not gonna
That takes a big checkbook
go
too.
over to Sandy and look at, by the mall, that you can't last hold out by where Mimi's used to be, right? That's the, you're never gonna get everybody to say, yep, I'm ready to sell it. Your pressure and your idea is gonna make me sell my property, so to me, I think you just have to accept it.
But I think it can still be a goal because it'll be part of developing a cohesive community, right? Instead of all these like separate things, which.
There's no way flag lots are a cohesive.
we can go research some of the other cities' codes and what they're doing and kind of pull the best of what's happening and bring it back from that. That can be our research.
Yeah.
Share.
So we have two other parts that we haven't talked about yet. One is, what's the temperature of this body on detached ADU regulations? Do we want to explore that? I know the commission has talked about this in the past, and they've said yes. The council willing to entertain a draft?
Of external ADUs?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen
Now, my recommendation is that we should keep them small.
This thing we
Keep them
have,
small.
this thing we have a
We're
lot
gonna do
Yeah.
of larger lots or things like that, that if you threw an ADU,
Yeah.
I see no problem with that.
Okay.
Yep.
We're gonna have to go.
All right.
I think
So
we're gonna have to anyway,
I
yeah.
think the only consideration with ADUs is we definitely wanna look at it side by side with short-term rentals.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
Kind of
on our
obvious.
list from Councilmember Orrin, so.
But I think we have that with internal already, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
league has a document on their website, if anybody knows that, about ADU. It's got some research included with it, some stats. It has some recommended best practices of what you can incorporate into it. So it's a good read, just kind of dig around.
I'll send it out.
Okay.
I'll send it out.
Send it out.
So the last one is the PUD, reducing the acreage requirement from 15 to 0 or 15 to something else. I have seen other cities start doing these zone types where everything's just negotiated, you know, within even a single parcel potentially. I don't think we're quite there yet, but yeah, we would really like to see this PUD number come down, but I don't know what we're comfortable with. And we don't have to arrive at a number tonight, but is there an agreement that maybe we should explore removing it or going lower than 15?
Yes.
Lower?
Okay. All right.
Yes.
I think it's a good tool.
And
to
really,
use.
that's all we really needed to know. And then we've got to probably fix that other code compliance on the R210. Where it requires a
Well,
PUD, so.
with what Adam was saying, if it was an issue of you didn't wanna have to consider every single little detail of every single one, but at the same time you wanna allow this tool for smaller developers, what if you, I don't know, maybe look to lower it a little bit, but then also have a window for smaller development PUDs that are really small?
Yeah.
To enable the small ones, but then you ignore the medium-sized ones, and then you have the big ones still. I don't know.
That's where I was thinking some of these kind of work together. You could have a district and those
Yeah.
PUD
Yeah.
requires these requirements.
Several different
Old-
paths.
And if you're considered an old town, you have these base requirements. If you're somewhere else,
Yeah.
these base requirements. And so you're creating neighborhoods that serve.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, it's a different situation now than when you guys first thought about, reviewing every single application, because
Because we're 25
Herriman
years
is,
old now.
well, that and almost 25. How far are we built out right now? What,
How far are we built out?
70%, 80%?
Yeah, I think population-wise, we are about
50?
almost halfway there.
But entitlements
For
are
a little-
70, 80.
We're talking about 65%.
Yeah. Oh, my goes take this out.
90% built out.
61
How much do we have already zoned?
Are there any other topics that we haven't talked about tonight that you think is relative to trying to identify newer or different codes in the city that would help navigate these smaller development potentials?
Nothing I dare bring up.
A lot of people bring up mixed use, vertical mixed use. some areas, town center where it might be really successful, but, where we've incorporated it into some areas of Rose Crest and stuff, it's not really taken off. Maybe it's not, hasn't been done right, but I don't know, is there any discussion about mixed use?
It feels like those are more appropriate in an MDA, in a larger development, that you would have more commercial
Location based,
applications.
yeah.
It doesn't feel like there would be any smaller infill kind of stuff.
We have in planning talked about the form-based zoning, and I think that may be an opportunity for more mixed use. We talked a lot about things like neighborhood commercial, you know, getting back to the little corner market or something that we haven't been able to swing it yet. It's been a lot of good conversations, but we don't know how to actually enforce it with our current codes.
I would say, I don't know, I've had a lot of discussions with people about zoning and kind of building off that. It's like, there's a lot of things like maybe the avenues that we like where you might have a fourplex next to a single family home or a duplex or some kind of thing like that. But it's really hard with our current zoning to get something like that that's a mixture of zones in a sense in a community. And we don't, there's really not, I don't know, you could say mixed use, but then I think we think of mixed use differently than just
Residential mixed use.
a residential mixed use, kind of like the avenues where you have some missing middle is kind of what I would say is kind of a good example of what that is. So otherwise it's like we get the same, size of lot just over and over again. It's like, okay, here's all of our quarter acres, here's all of our 6,000.
That's one of the benefits of having a form-based overlay.
Yeah.
Is that gives you the ability to manipulate, what you're building next to each other.
Yeah.
While maintaining the vision of what you want your community to be.
Well, I think that creates an age in place opportunity, right? Where you can move within your community and stay there versus, every house around me is the same size, same lot size. I have to move to get something that I want.
One of the incentives that we talked about in that RA1 draft zone was the opportunity of looking at gross density development patterns, which we do all the time in our MDAs. Just apply that tool to a smaller development pattern, and then allowing for lot averaging so that you get more variety, like we've tried to do in the past and have not been successful at doing so.
Do it.
I'd like to see small home options.
Yeah, so that's another thing that we're looking at is you have to bring down the height and the footprint of all of these homes on the smaller lots. It's gonna be pretty aggressive. And then if a developer wants to seek a modification, that's when we can require design standards. So if we say the maximum height is 20 feet, our current maximum height in a single family is 35. So if we're gonna say 20 feet, you're gonna talk about cottage or bungalow development. But if somebody says, well, I have a house plan that's 25 feet, and you want that, then we can require design guidelines. So I'm looking for triggers like that so that we can always bring in a design standard. I think doing small lot, small home without design standards, I think in this environment is a recipe for
Garbage.
Yeah.
So are we allowed to do maximum square footage with the design standards?
I've looked at that. And I've gone over with the commission over what are the things we can't do. And I'm moving towards everything that is not prohibiting us. And for example, you can do a maximum setback as well as a minimum setback. State code doesn't say you can't do that.
Okay.
So
That was the one
We'll
I
see.
particularly heard, was that maybe you
Yeah.
couldn't do a maximum square footage of the home, but
Minimum.
yeah.
no.
Well, you could
we
require-
eliminated the minimum
No, because we
requirement.
were
We can
talking
require
about
1,000.
small.
Yeah, 1,000.
But there's nothing
Yeah.
Right.
like
It used to be 2,500.
Mm-hmm.
And then they
But
just
if we want to make
Yeah,
sure
you
that we
just take
have
that out.
small homes on a small lot instead of large homes
Yeah.
on small lots.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't say we can't.
Well,
Yeah.
in discussing that, you can change your setbacks
Yeah.
so that you could say accumulatively, you need at least, 11 feet of side yard setbacks. That allows
Okay.
for
The
a driveway
footprint.
on one side and then, 5 on one side. But, yeah, so you can play with things like that.
Okay.
So,
Thanks.
In the past, we've been the first out the gate on a lot of stuff, and we get recognized for a lot of the good we're doing, but developing these standards before the legislature session or before work sessions, does that trigger potential new laws or rules or restrictions, possibly?
That hasn't, I mean,
I think I know the answer, but.
We could adjust it.
but usually if there's a complaint, right? But I think what we're doing is we're creating a tool that development will want to use.
This might
Right?
be something they use. as
This
an
is an
example.
incentive,
Yeah.
right?
And
This
we're-
is more in line with what the state has been seeking as well.
And we can
And we're not first either. I mean,
No.
I think it was like Clinton and Clearfield both have zones like this.
Yeah,
too.
I'm just talking
Look
about
at.
like the triggering or the things that they may be able to take away our tools again for land use stuff. But if it, I mean, obviously if we can use our resources in the league and our examples to help better the system, sure.
I see a need, I kind of agree with Lauren on the smaller house lot sizes, but, what I don't want to see happen is the pendulum swing all the way over here, so all we're encouraging is small growth. I get it with some of the infill areas, but, there's still a place for half-acre lots and such, as well as 6,000 square foot lots. But I don't wanna, throw the baby out with the bathwater and just go one way.
Completely agree.
And we were just hoping to be able to start creating some tools to address, because we're kind of limited right now.
Yeah, I think.
Work with the
this
districts.
would be
Yeah.
key,
Okay, anything else?
Further study sounds great to me.
So how do we want to bring these back? Do we want them to just come back through the planning commission process, like normal? Then council? Okay.
Yes.
Obviously, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of crossover with community development, economic development, engineering. So we'll all be part of that.
Yeah, we have nothing to do with it.
So, yeah, I think we got some good direction on where to go. Really appreciate everyone's time, feedback on this. This helps us out. It'll keep us busy. We were looking for some things to do.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Again, I always say this when we meet, we haven't met since August, but I would like to take a chance to thank the commission for what you do. You really have played a pivotal role. I miss working with all of you, but most of you.
You can thank the tight timeline, I think, to Nathan and Wendy. They're the ones who said,
Good job.
keep it tight.
Good job.
Yeah.
Everybody come out to the rodeo tomorrow?
Yeah, rodeo.
Rodeo this weekend.
Got free tickets.
Congratulations. Okay, with that, next planning commission meeting is next Wednesday. Next city council meeting is the 12th, both at 7 o'clock. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Beat you.
I know, right?
Beat you, Adam.
Tightening my purse strings every year.
What do we turn these into? Shelley,